tuned in to Maroon TV News.
Coming up on Maroon TV News, alcohol-related ER visits are on the rise. The Logan Center unveils a new addition, and a Maroon TV exclusive interview with David Axelrod.
Welcome to Maroon TV News. I'm Natalia Summy.
And I'm Alex Sideropoulos. This week's top story. The R.L.D. Cathey Dining Commons was forced to close after lunch on Thursday due to recurring health code violations, according to an email sent by the Executive Director of UChicago Dining, Richard Mason, and the Interim Director of the Office of Undergraduate Student Housing, Anna Campos. The Chicago Department of Public Health found a repeat violation involving fruit flies in the dining and food preparation areas. The Chicago Department of Public Health website further elaborated that approximately 40 to 45 live small flies were scattered in dishwashing areas, and approximately 75 to 100 mice droppings were scattered in all prep areas along walls, under sinks, on the interior of cabinets, and throughout the premises. It is not known when Cathey will reopen. As a result, UChicago Dining has extended the operation hours of Bartlett and Pierce dining halls. Additionally, students with house tables at Cathey received 100 extra Maroon dollars to use at various food shops on campus.
According to the Chicago Maroon, alcohol-related emergency room visits have doubled this year, with 17 students making trips in the first month and a half of the quarter, 10 of which were first years, 4 of which were residents of Max Pilevsky. Associate Dean of Students Marianne West shows moderate concern, claiming that the number in itself is still low comparing UChicago to Ivy League schools. According to the Harvard Crimson, 183 alcohol-related medical calls were made on campus in 2011. West claims there is no cultural shift taking place at the university and that UChicago students are still self-selective. Some attribute the spike to a lack of knowledge about careful alcohol consumption, while others call it a healthy indicator of students responsibly intervening to help one another.
David Axelrod, senior campaign strategist to President Barack Obama, spoke at the Logan Center on Monday in an event hosted by the Institute of Politics. Axelrod, who will assume his position as the director of the Institute in January, talked about his role in the 2012 presidential campaign and his own career in politics. After a conversation with the Institute's Deputy Director for Programming, Steve Edwards, Axelrod answered questions from the audience. Maroon TV's political reporter Sean Graff received an exclusive interview with Axelrod after the event.
Hey, we're here with David Axelrod, the director of the Institute of Politics, on his first main big event here at the University of Chicago. So David, what is it like to transition from being in the White House every day, running a campaign now, to then coming to this institute?
Well, you know, it's a great transition because one of the things that so energized me when I was involved in the campaign were the young people. Just their energy and their idealism, and of course the whole purpose of this Institute of Politics is to give the young people on the campus a chance to interact with practitioners, to wrestle with some of these contemporary issues and hear it through the mouth of newsmakers, and hopefully to inspire and hook people up with opportunities to serve in some form or fashion. And that to me is a great transition from what I was doing.
And how do you envision your particular role here will play out in the coming weeks and years? And I know there's a lot to work out and how this institute will really work, but what do you want most for your role to be?
What I want most is to bring as many interesting people across the political spectrum to this campus, including fellows who will stay and interact with students on a sustained basis. I want to hook as many kids up as I can with internships around the country in legislative bodies, government bodies, in not-for-profits and political consulting shops, in newspapers and broadcast outlets, to encourage them to consider a life in the public arena.
And why is it so important to start at in college and even before that, working as a public servant and experiencing that? Why is that something that more young people should value?
I think what is important is to be exposed to it, because you all are going to be making decisions in pretty short order about how you want to pursue your careers. And you know, there'll be different tugs and pulls of graduate school and law school and medical school, and you know, before people commit to those things, I'd like them to consider the public arena as well, because we need good, well-motivated, and talented people in the public arena, and the University of Chicago has that in surplus.
So you come from a particular ideological persuasion that many of us are familiar with. How are you going to attract those from across the aisle to come to Chicago and talk to, University of Chicago students?
One of the things that I believe deeply, and I've prided myself on, is that you can disagree and disagree vehemently on philosophy and still appreciate each other as folks who love the country, who believe that public service is an honorable pursuit. I have friends on both sides of the aisle, people with whom I've competed against time and again, who I count among my best friends, because I know they care about the country. We have different ideas about how to proceed, but it doesn't disqualify them in my view. And I hope to call upon all those associations. But beyond that, the University of Chicago itself has its own reputation and is a great magnet for people around the country. When I say to people, I want you to come to the University of Chicago, Republican or Democrat, there's great enthusiasm for that. And it isn't just out of friendship for me, it's out of appreciation for this institution and this city.
Bipartisanship is something that certainly many young people aspire to and appreciate and enjoy. And I understand one last thing, that you're working on a charity for your daughter, and yes. I want to give a shout out to that right before we leave. Can you explain that?
Yes, I have a daughter with epilepsy, chronic epilepsy. It's been a debilitating issue in her life. Epilepsy kills 50,000 people a year. So I'd won a bet during the election on television that would have required me to shave my mustache off on Morning Joe if we had lost. But instead of collecting, we recalibrated, and now if I raise $1 million by the end of November online for /thestash.com or on /thestash.com, then I will still shave my mustache off on Morning Joe. We're 900,000 or so down the road here, so we've got 100,000 to go this week, and the mustache will go.
I look forward to seeing you clean shaven. Thank you very much, David.
Great to be with you.
Have a good day.
In addition to speaking with David Axelrod, Sean Graff had the opportunity to sit down with college Republican Eric Wessan. Wessan represented the Republicans at the Institute of Politics student debate earlier this year. Here's what he had to say.
But 53% of Americans believe that Republicans are going to be blamed, or should be blamed rather, if we go over the fiscal cliff. So they're seeing the Republicans as obstructionists and the Democrats as willing to compromise. The Democrats have said, look, we are willing to go along with getting rid of these loopholes. And they have said, we are willing to raise taxes on those making over $250,000 a year. And we are willing to make cuts to certain discretionary spending. So they seem to be the ones that are compromising. The Republicans seem to be rejecting compromise because they won't raise taxes on anyone.
Well, let's just be clear here. Closing loopholes is not something the Republicans want to do. That's a compromise they've made in order to facilitate the Democrats, right?
So the Republicans have made no compromises.
You don't consider closing loopholes?
Well, no, that was Mitt Romney's idea running when he ran for president. So
that was the compromise.
You can't say that's a compromise. That was what he ran on.
He ran on compromising. I mean, just because you have to look at where he started out.
He ran on compromise.
He ran on compromise.
So the one area where the Republicans are willing to compromise is
these
closing
deductions.
loopholes.
Yeah.
But they are not willing to compromise by getting rid of, for example, any tax cuts.
I mean, I can't necessarily speak for every Republican,
right.
but
well,
it seems to
would
be.
Would you get rid of any tax cuts?
Would I get rid of any tax cuts?
Yes.
I mean, probably. I mean, I'd have to sift through the IRS.
You think there are tax cuts that should be eliminated?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, when you talk about tax cuts, what are you talking specifically about? Federal income tax?
Do you think there should be any taxes that should be eliminated? For example, there is a tax on something, right?
Yeah.
Do you think do you think we should get rid of some of the tax cuts we give to people?
Yes. Although I will say that, like, for instance, let's look at some of the things that are taxed that probably could be taxed differently and more, right? For instance, capital gains and dividends, right?
So you support that as opposed to Senator Schumer, who's against it?
I mean, I don't know Senator Schumer's position.
Well, I'm telling you Senator Schumer's position.
So what I would say is, if you were to lower rates across the board, by a significant amount and then raise the capital gains and dividend tax, that probably makes more sense to me than to keep those rates very low and to raise taxes overall on income. Then you're basically, you have this ability to tax to force people to basically give you money, right? But it's done very inefficiently. There's this idea that there are ideas that belong to one party or another party. That's ridiculous, right? If tomorrow, Coburn and some other people were to come out with a plan to raise taxes, that wouldn't be them necessarily compromising with Democrats. That's just what they're doing. People have to realize that just because one group of people is saying something does not mean that they own every form of that idea. I mean, to me, it's kind of ridiculous. It's like Apple patenting the rectangle. Like, to me, I understand they want to do that, but it doesn't seem like a very reasonable patent. In the same way that reasonable, rational politics don't belong to one party or the other party. And in both parties, you also have radicals and you have extremists. The key is figuring out a way that they can work together on important issues.
Okay, thanks, Eric. I think that's a good note to end on, bipartisanship. Thanks so much.
They announced that Pierce Tower will close at the end of this year. The dorm, which received national attention in March after maintenance problems, will be replaced by a new dorm scheduled to open in 2016.
For the fourth straight year, the Booth School of Business ranked first on Bloomberg Businessweek's 2012 Best Business School rankings. Harvard Business School came second, and the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton Business School came third, while Stanford and Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management rounded out the top 5. The rankings are based on student surveys, employer surveys, and intellectual capital measures.
On November 19th, the Seminary Co-op bookstore moved from the Chicago Theological Seminary to its new home in Hyde Park at 5751 South Woodlawn Avenue. 100 people turned up to the unveiling of the new store, showing their enthusiastic support. From its humble beginnings in 1961, where 17 people each invested $10 in the institution, the store has grown to have 54,000 shareholders, President Barack Obama being one of them. The new space is almost 3 times larger over 2 floors, with larger windows and higher ceilings. Currently, the store carries 14,000 titles, including everything from Christian theology to astronomy.
Adding to the list of coffee shops on campus, the Logan Center Cafe opened on Tuesday, November 27th. Maroon TV was there.
On Tuesday, the university unveiled the newest cafe on campus, the Logan Center Cafe. Already, the cafe has become a popular place for students to eat, study, and relax. Overall, there seems to be a positive response to the food and the architecture.
I think it's gorgeous, and it's really, I live in BJ, so it's really close and convenient. Yeah, I like how big it is, because usually the cafes are itty-bitty man. So this is nice. It's a nice choice.
I think it's just a really nice space. I think all of the furniture they put in makes it really comfortable, whether you want to just hang out or actually do something.
To be honest, I find it very slightly disappointing simply insofar as, given the price, it is not prepared on the spot, and it seems to sort of detract from the overall quality.
The cafe will also soon be the only cafe on campus to offer alcohol. Once construction of the bar is complete, it will serve beer and wine.
Vicente Fernandez is here with sports, and Vicente, we love it. Basketball's rolling around, but it was a tough week for the Maroons.
Thanks, Alex. It was a tough week for Chicago sports. The Maroons faced one of their most difficult challenges of the season on the court as the Chicago men and women's basketball teams took on Wheaton College. Unfortunately for the Maroons, both Wheaton Thunder teams came into the week and left the week undefeated. On the women's side, Chicago hosted the Thunder in their first home game of the season. At 3-0, the Wheaton team was hot from the start, taking a 9-1 lead in the opening minutes of play. They extended the lead to double digits before halftime. Good outside shooting brought the Maroons within 6 on 2 occasions in the second half, but the Thunder didn't fade. Despite fourth-year guard Jenny Lillimore's 14 points and 4 3-pointers, Chicago fell to the Thunder 77-62. The Maroons have now lost 3 straight and have a 1-3 record. The Chicago men's team hoped to bounce back against 3-0 Wheaton after suffering their first loss of the season against Augustana. The first half was all defense as both teams were were held under 45% from the field. The score heading into the locker room was 28-23 in the Thunder's favor. An 8-0 run early in the second half tied the game for the Maroons, but Chicago was never able to take the lead. Wheaton eventually pulled away with a 17-5 run late in the half, led by third-year guard Tyler Peters, who finished with a game-high 24 points. The final score of 64-52 pushes Chicago's record to 3-2 on the season.
Maroon TV's Facebook page is the source for all of Maroon TV's latest happenings. Visit www.facebook.com/MaroonTV.
That wraps up Maroon TV's final episode for the fall quarter. We thank all of you for watching thus far.
I'm Natalia Summy.
And I'm Alex Sideropoulos. Have a great break.